Good afternoon. My name is Averil Nero, and I have been a resident of the Monterey Peninsula for the past 12 years. My particular interest in being here is because I desperately want to have in Monterey some recognition of the veterans. As you know, there's a colossal military history in Monterey and the area. We have Fort Ord, which 2 million troops went through. We have 2 existing military facilities. We have the Naval Postgraduate School and the Defense Language Institute. We have a great number of veterans living in the area, and I feel it very disappointing that there is nothing in Monterey that honors our troops. We have men and women serving the world over, and my particular interest is this, that in 1941, had not American troops come to Europe, I would not be sitting here today. And I feel very strongly to do something to honor our troops, current, past, and so forth. I'd like to now give you a little history about Fort Ord, which is quite an amazing history. Fort Ord was named for Major General Edward Otho Crespic Ord, a mustachioed mathematical genius and a rumored descendant of King George IV, and a veteran of the Seminole, Indian, and Civil Wars. Ord first came to California in the company of William Tacoma Sherman and Henry Halleck, sailing round Cape Horn in 1847 to the Presidio of Monterey, where he served as a first lieutenant. The gold rush inflated cost of living forced Ord to take a second job as a surveyor to supplement his army income. He eventually mapped much of what would become the city of LA. He retired from the military in 1880, age 52, and picked up a contract job building railroads in Mexico. The fort occupies 28,000 acres of prime California beachfront. That is the size of San Francisco, give or take a few miles. Monterey Bay hooks around it, and it gives the intrepid sand dune climber a magnificent view of the city. Fort Ord has its roots in the First World War, part of a massive expansion of the US Armed Forces. Faced with swelling from 200,000 regulars in 1916 to 2 million draftees in the space of 2 years, the Army purchased immense tracts of land which would later become Fort Ord. It was originally called the Giggling Reservation. General Vinegar Joe Stilwell, so named for his notoriously quarrelsome nature, oversaw significant expansions of the fort in August of 1940, a response to the growing threat of war. Fort Ord swelled from 15,000 to 20,000 acres, and the 7th Infantry, nicknamed the Bayonets, was reactivated and stationed there. German prisoners of war, brought back by the thousands from the European theatre after D-Day, were used to build new bunkers and walls. North and south, the cities of Marina and Seaside sprang up to meet the fort's increased housing and service needs. In the post-1950s, Fort Ord began to be repurposed as a training facility, a role it would occupy for the next 3 decades. The fort's importance increased dramatically during the long years of the Vietnam War, when it became the chief training center of the nation. It was also the first racially integrated base in the nation. In the face of escalating public opposition to the war in 1969, Fort Ord closed itself to outsiders. In 1970, after Nixon's expansion into Cambodia, 3,000 demonstrators were turned away from the fort at rifle point. Between 1940 and 1975, when Fort Ord ceased activities as a basic training center, an estimated 1.5 million young men and women were trained in its sturdy bunkers. Fort Ord's old unit, the 7th Infantry, spent 2 decades on foreign soil before being deactivated in 1971. They returned to Fort Ord 3 years later, reactivated as a light infantry division, and in 1989, while the 7th Infantry was in Panama, the base realignment and closure process began assessing military holdings. In 1991, the BRAC recommended that Fort Ord be shut down. Like the gold rush that forced Major General Ord to survey Los Angeles, the booming California real estate market had driven the cost of living and location far too high for the military. In 1994, the fort was officially closed, and the 7th Infantry deactivated with it. By the strangest of all coincidences, one of the last actions that the bayonets engaged in was the quelling of the 1992 LA riots, a police action in the very place that Major General Ord had mapped a century and a half before.